My Book of Poems by Gabriela Montaño. To create a perfect book of poems, I had to ask myself, what makes a good poetry book? I then had to do some research to figure this out. I googled my favorite poets, including Robert Frost, Shane Quixon, and even Shakespeare. I began to steal from them, compiling all the poems I have ever written, finished or unfinished. I revised a few to make them rhyme, so they sounded more like Robert Frost. I even added a sonnet to portray Shakespeare in my book. I wrote out all my personal slam poems, stealing that theme from Quixon. After rewriting and editing all of my poems, I decided that I wanted my book to be more unique and personal. I wanted it to represent me in some sort of way. I grabbed my favorite fashion magazine and began to cut and paste. My poems are now surrounded by beautiful collages that made the writing look less dull and boring. While creating my book, I began to reminisce. I daydreamed about the first poems I ever wrote. In elementary school, my friends were always impressed with how easy I could make things rhyme. But that wasn't very interesting after a while. In middle school, I started going through a hard time. My parents got a divorce and my grandmother passed away. I didn't know how to get my feelings out, so I began to write. Standard writing always bored me, so I wrote poems instead. They were dark, and even sometimes twisted. I didn't want anyone to see that side of me, so I always hid my journals. When freshman year came along, I had my first poetry unit. This was the first time that I was forced to write poetry for a grade. Here is an example of one of the poems that I wrote. It's called Guilt. Guilt is as black as the bottom of an empty well. Don't listen as the echo of your shame repeats over and over again. Don't cry at the taste of food stolen from those starving. And don't scream when the smell of an angel's tears burns your nose. Don't fear the hate-driven eyes watching every decision you make. Your world may seem filled with light, but the darkness entombs your soul as penance. After turning it in, my teacher made me read it to the class. Everyone was impressed, and I wasn't so shy with my poetry anymore. Then I went into sophomore year. I didn't write as much anymore, only for school papers. But again, when the poetry unit came along, my English teacher loved my writing. Things are getting tough at home again, so my teacher had to really push me to pursue in writing. I finally joined the slam poetry team, and I couldn't have felt happier. While performing my poems, I finally felt a sense of release. The tough times were getting easier, or maybe I just felt that way. I would not let go of this feeling, so of course I signed up for the creative writing class at my school for junior year. And well, that's where I am today. Will I be wanted, worthy, pretty?